I'm Rita. Welcome back to my booktube channel, Life Worth Reading. Today I will be doing another tier ranking video, and this time I'll be tier ranking all of the books that I read in 2020. I'm doing this video first of all because I love tier ranking stuff and watching tier ranking videos, and also because I created my booktube channel like in late November of 2020, and so I didn't really get to speak about all the books that I read throughout the year. And so I thought that I would just do like a quick little recap of all the books that I read last year. Overall, there are 47 books on this list. 2 of them are DNFs, but I read like a lot of the book before I did DNF them. That's why I'm counting them. And I did not count rereads. I did, I think, 3 or 4 rereads throughout the year, but I didn't count them. And so there are 47 books on this list, and let's get to them. Also, I know that 47 books is not a lot compared to what other booktubers read, but it was the most that I've ever read in a year. And so I'm still really proud of that number, and always remember that like the number that you do read is really not that important. Do not compare yourself to other people that read a lot more than you. Be proud of what you did read and what you want to read, and that's literally all that matters. As always, I feel like we need to start with the categories. Let me go quickly through them. The first category is our untouchable category. This is like, these are the perfect books that I read in 2020. These are like my absolute favorite reads, and so they are completely untouchable in my eyes. Then we have the second category that is so good I could cry, and these are books that are just so amazing. They're also one of my favorite reads of 2020, but just not as good as the untouchable. Then we have Cool, no doubt, which is the Jake Peralta of categories because I love Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Shameless plug, if you haven't seen my Brooklyn Nine-Nine book recommendations, please make sure to do that. I'll leave it up somewhere in the cards and down below. But basically, this is a category for like the cool books that I read. Like, they're not my favorites, but they weren't bad. Like, they're like cool, you know? They're nice. Then we have my meh category. This just like didn't impress me. Not as good as the cool tier, you know? They were just okay. And then we have Yeah Nasty. This is a node to one of my favorite shows as when I was a kid, and that is That's So Raven. You know, when That's So Raven screams Yeah Nasty. This is how I feel about these books. They just were not good in my opinion, and they kind of sucked. I wanted to make the books on this list be like in chronological order, but I didn't get to do that. So these are just like randomly mixed and not in order. But yeah, let's get started. The first book that we have on this list is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This has to go, of course, in So Good I Could Cry. This book was so good I could cry, like literally. It wasn't quite untouchable. I thought that the actual final reveal, if you know what I'm talking about, I'm not going to spoil anything. I thought it was a little meh, to be quite honest. But I love the whole setup towards that. I love the story. I love the drama, the old Hollywood drama, the relationships. And it was just a really amazing book. It was so good I could cry. And I kind of almost did. So yeah. Next up we have A Maze of Death by Philip K. Dick. This is actually one of the last books that I read in 2020. Philip K. Dick, if any of you don't know, is like a sci-fi author in the 70s. I think this book is from like the actual 1970 or 1971. I don't read a lot of sci-fi, but like it was a short book and my boyfriend lent it to me and it was like, it's really good, read it. I think you'll like it. It's really weird. And I read it, and you know what? It was actually really fun. It was kind of like a murder mystery kind of thing where like these people go on a planet and start dying off one by one, and you have to figure out like what's happening to them. So the mystery element was nice, but honestly, you can tell that this book was written by a white author in the 1970s because it was honestly racist, sexist. Most of the things written on there did not age very well, and the final actual twist, even if I'm sure it was great in the 70s, it was like not that great now, you know, like it wasn't all that impressive. And so this was just like I think I'm gonna put it in meh because even though I did enjoy it, it did not age well. It is kind of racist and sexist, and so it has to go on meh. Sorry. Then we have An Ember in the Ashes by Sabbath here. This is actually one of the rereads that I mentioned. I read this book twice this year, and it was honestly so good I could cry. Also, it wasn't like untouchable, But I think it was really fun. It was great. It was a good setup for the series. I actually just read A Torch Against the Night and I did not feel the same way about it. But An Ember in the Ashes is so good, I could cry. Then we have An Anonymous Girl by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen. This is a thriller that I honestly thought was kind of meh. Like, I think at the time it was like nearly a 3-star read for me, but the reveal really didn't do it for me. I thought it was kind of stupid. And even though the whole setup was a little interesting, it just ended up being a meh thriller for me. Then we have a Portuguese book. This is called Aparição. It is by Virgílio Freire. My brother recommended the book to me, and oh my god, it really didn't do it for me. Basically, this book was a 2-star read for me. It was honestly kind of boring. And I do like Portuguese literature a lot, but this one was very boring, so it has to go in Yeah Nasty. Then we have Ask Ken Yes by Mary Beth Kean. This is a book that I read in like April or May, and at the time I gave it 5 stars. This is like a family drama. Honestly, that's really all that it is. About these two people throughout their entire lives and how they come together, and just basically suburban family drama. But you know what? It was actually kind of forgettable. Like, it didn't make my best books of 2020 because it was not that memorable. And so I think I have to put it in cool, 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 cool. Because at the time, it was so good I could cry. And I cried a little, like I teared up. But now, it like went down a tier because it was not memorable. And I kind of forgot that this book existed and that I read it. So, ooh, now we have Becoming by Michelle Obama. All of you know how I feel about this book by now. I'm not going to mention it again. But this is for sure untouchable. Like, this is one of the best memoirs that I've ever read. And I love Michelle Obama. So, untouchable for sure. Then we have a nonfiction that I read. This is part of a series. The next one must be coming soon. And it is Boys and Sex by Peggy Orgenstein. It is a nonfiction that basically like explains the whole relationship between boys and sex from a younger age to like the early 20s. Peggy Orgenstein really interviews a lot of boys and asks them really personal questions about their relationship to porn and consent and how they feel about all those topics. And you know what? It was very interesting. It was better than Girls and Sex, which is coming up probably sometime, because it did really explore the pressure that boys feel to act a certain way and how many of them are actually against feeling that, but they just have a feeling of performance when related to sex. And I thought it was very interesting. It doesn't change anything about sexism and incels, honestly, but it was a really interesting read. And if you are interested in the topic, I definitely recommend it. So I have to put this in cool. You know, it was nice. It was nice. We have Bunny by Mona Awad, which is a horror book that was really talked about in like middle of last year. And honestly, I'm kind of struggling if I put it in cool or meh, because it ended up being like a 3-star read for me because the beginning and the middle were so strong and weird and horrific, but then like towards the end it kind of leaned towards meh. But I think I'm still gonna put it in cool because it was a really interesting read and it was very memorable. Like, I still have a lot of it in my head. So then we also have a recent read of mine, and that is Burn Our Bodies Down by Rory Power. Since reading this book, I have unhauled it because it was honestly kind of meh. This book was kind of boring. Like, the concept was really interesting, but the main character was a little dumb. And the whole mystery just didn't intrigue me all that much, and the reveals were kind of meh. So this one, really not that impressive. Then we have Call Me By Your Name by Andre Asseman. Honestly, I listened to this on audiobook, which is narrated by Armie Hammer. I'm filming this like way after his like cannibal reveals came out. He is a scary dude. What the hell is up with that? So and you know what? I felt it. Like, I was listening to this audiobook, and even though his voice was soothing, it gave like a really creepy sense to this book. And I still have to like reread it either physically or in ebook form because I didn't like listening to it. It made all of Elio's thoughts seem so more psychotic and creepy than they actually were. I remember there was this one line where Elio is like, I wish that I could turn Oliver into like a cripple and like cripple him so that he'd be like in a wheelchair and I could take care of him forever. And like Armie Hammer saying that to me in my ear, I was like, huh, this is really psychotic. And so I have no idea where to put this as because I really do want to reread it and have a fresh eyes, because when I listened to it, I didn't enjoy it. I think I'm gonna put it in cool, 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 cool because it is worth a reread. Like, it's not meh, like, it is worth a reread, and I do want to get to it because that audiobook experience actually really wasn't it. Next up, we have Carry On by Remy Rowell. If you've seen my worst books of 2020 video, another shameless plug, sorry. You know how I feel about this book. It was meh. It was meh. You know what? It is not worth putting in Ya Nasty. Like, it wasn't, even though it is part of that worst books, like, it was a very disappointing read, most of all. And it was just all around meh. Like, it wasn't that bad, like, worth me putting in Ya Nasty, but it's just really forgettable. Just all around meh. Next up, we have Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins, the second book in the Hunger Games trilogy. I read this trilogy for the first time in 2020, and oh my god, did I love Catching Fire. It was definitely like my favorite book of 2020, and is definitely untouchable in my eyes. That book is perfection, and I will stand by that until like the end. Like, that book is just absolute perfection. And that's that on that, honestly. Then we have Circe by Madeline Miller. I also mentioned this book in my best books of 2020 video, but honestly what I did say back then was that this was an amazing book, but honestly kind of forgettable. I don't remember most of what happened in the book. I just remember the feeling that it gave me. And so because of that, I have to put it in So Good I Could Cry because it made me really emotional at the time, but it was honestly kind of like Ask Again, Yes. I just remember the feelings that I got while reading it, but like the plot is all like so fuzzy to me now. I can't remember most of what happened, but yeah, Circe, So Good I Could Cry for sure. Then I have Death Note Volume 1 and 2 because they're like bond together. I also have this black edition on my shelves. I love Death Note. I think that this is a really fun manga and anime, and it was really, really good. Not quite So Good I Could Cry, like that's not the feeling that I get, but it is kind of better than Cool 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 Cool. Like, I'm gonna put it in Cool 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 Cool, but it's a little better than that. Then we have Galatea by Madeline Miller, which is her only short story and hopefully her last because I really hated this book. The rage that this little story gives me, this is going straight to Ya Nasty because Ya Nasty. Like, I hated this book with all of my guts. I don't know how someone that writes so brilliantly as Madeline Miller does managed to do something that sucked this bad. So, Galatea, Ya Nasty. Then we have Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbard. Oh my god, this is one of the only romances that I read last year that I actually really, really loved. This is going in So Good I Could Cry. I listened to the audiobook, which is really fun, even though that Chloe Brown's character sounded a little bit like an old lady. But other than that, like, I loved her. I love Redford. And just their whole relationship, the representation of chronic illness, just everything about this book was so good I could cry. Then we have the other book that I did mention, Girls and Sex by Peggy Orgenstein. I thought that this was a little bit more tame than Boys and Sex. I don't think that she explored this relationship as well as she could have. I think that this book talked a lot more about consent and about, unfortunately, girls' experiences with sexual assault and rape. And it didn't really explore some other also important aspects to girl sexuality. And so this was a little bit more mad than Boys and Sex, honestly. Like, it wasn't mad completely, it was still really interesting, but I think that Peggy Ornstein could have done something a little bit more. Like, she could have gone the extra mile as she did with Boys and Sex and like really talked about more things that are not usually talked about, you know? Then we have I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. Honestly, I have no idea how I feel about this book. I listened to the audiobook, was just so creepy. Like, I was listening to it and I was just like at every noise around me. But I don't know, it's always what gets me. Like, in horror books and thrillers, like, if the final twist doesn't get me, it is like, why did I waste so much time reading a book? Like, that was just leading up to this. I think I might put it in meh. Like, I'm sad about that, but I think I might put in meh. Yeah. Next up, we have Kim Ji-young, born 1982, by Cho Nam-ju. If I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm really sorry. But honestly, this book was really interesting. It is about girls' experiences growing up in South Korea, which is something that I've never really like delved into. But what is talked about in this book is that it is a really sexist place where girls are like, they grow up believing that they're worth less in school, and it was a really interesting read. Honestly, I'm gonna put it in cool, 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 cool. It's just really interesting if you want to learn more about South Korea and women's experiences in South Korea. Then we have Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. I never know how to pronounce his name. This was my first book by this author, and honestly, it was a lot of fun. People say that his books all have the same formula, so I didn't really pick up on that since it was my first read of his. But this was actually a really interesting concept. I like the twist, I like most of what happened, and so I have to put it in cool, 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 cool. Then we have Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Honestly, I'm really unsure whether to put this in cool, 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 cool or meh again, because I didn't really like what happened at the end of this book. It is one of those horror books that I actually really didn't like the twist. Even though it was original, it really wasn't not my thing, and I can appreciate the author's attempt to make this a really interesting and fresh horror book twist, but it didn't really work for me. But you know what? I think that the actual story is quite good, and so I have to put it in cool, 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 cool. Like, it was not a meh book. The reveal just didn't really work for me. Then we have Mockingjay, the third and final installment to the Hunger Games series. What the hell is this book? You know, I didn't like it. I had always heard that people didn't really like Mockingjay, but I just figured that either people were just not happy because most people aren't when a series ends. Like, most people don't like the final moments of a series, and it's always very controversial. So I hoped that I would feel differently, but this book really wasn't it, and I have to put it in meh. No matter how much that like hurts me. If I were rating the series as a whole, I would put it in So Good I Could Cry, because like it is worth the hype, like the whole series. But Mockingjay, like standing on its own, it's a meh book. Like, it is what it is. It was not great, and it was not the ending that I think most of us wanted. Then we have My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I honestly debated whether or not to put this in my best books of 2020 video, because I really did enjoy this. This was a beautiful read. But when I say like I enjoyed it because it was a beautiful book, but it was not an enjoyable reading experience at all. I try to make like the best books of 2020 be like as positive a video as I could, and so this did not really fit that mood, because it is like one of the hardest things that I've ever had to read. If you are not in the right state of mind to read this, do not. But if you are, it is a beautiful book. You can tell that this author spent years writing and perfecting it, and yeah, it was just so hard to read. I think I'm still gonna put it in So Good I Could Cry, because it was really, really good, but it is not a positive or enjoyable reading experience at all. Next up, we have My Sister, the Serial Killer by, and I'm very sure that I'll be pronouncing this so wrong, Oh Yin Kan Braithwaite. I'm really not sure, but this book was honestly very interesting. From the reviews that I have read, it is very hit or miss. And you know what? I actually really did like it. I think it's gonna be on cool, because I think most people don't enjoy this because you don't really get all of the answers that you wanted, and it's a short book, so there's not like a settled ending to it. It is a bit open-ended, and you actually don't get to see the consequences of the actions taken throughout the book. But other than that, it was really fun. It was really interesting, and it did explore like sisterly relationships in a way that I've never seen before, and how far you'll go to protect your family even though maybe they're not worth protecting. And it was just a really interesting read, and I enjoyed reading it. So cool. Then we have On Writing, a memoir of the craft by Stephen King. Actually, this is my first Stephen King ever. I still haven't read any of his fiction books, but this is basically a nonfiction, a sort of memoir of his. Like, half of it is a memoir and half of it are writing tips. But this was a very interesting read. I'm gonna put it in cool. Like, it is a memoir that is definitely worth checking out. Then we have Perfume by Patrick Susskind. This is one of the worst books that I read in 2020. I actually DNF'd this book, but I was like 2/3 of the way through. Like, I had so little left that I have to include it just to feel like it was worth something, like that it was worth my time. But honestly, this is going straight to a nasty, like... Then we have The Power by Naomi Alderman. I did not do this on purpose, but this is another nasty read. This is the, like... If I had finished Perfume, perhaps it would have been like my #1 worst read of 2020. But since I didn't, I did finish The Power by Naomi Alderman, and that was like my #1 worst read of 2020. Like, it was so bad. I hated this book with every fiber of my being, and I never want to look at it or talk about it or see it ever again. Then we have Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. This is one of the most surprising books that I read in 2020. I am so surprised at how much I loved it, but it was really good. And so it has to go in so good I could cry, because like it really did surprise me. It was a wonderful book. So I finally understand what Paperback Dreams has been talking about all these years. I finally get you, Kat. This was an amazing book. Next up, we have Renegades by Marissa Meyer. This is my only other DNF on this list because I read page 300 something of a over 500 page book, and so I'm definitely counting this as a read. And I don't want to put it in nasty because like it's not objectively bad or the worst, but it is just so boring and pointless and so cliche. Like it has to go in meh, but it's like a bad meh, you know? Then we have Yoko Ogawa's Revenge. This was an amazing horror book that I read. I love this book so much. It has to go in cool. If you haven't read it, please check it out if you like horror books. Then we have The Cool Prince by Holly Black. Guys, don't make me do this. I thought that I would enjoy the Folk of the Air trilogy, but I went into it with an open mind. Like, I swear, I did not read it to hate it. Like, it was not a hate read at all. I really did want to see what people saw when reading this book, but I really didn't. Especially as a first one in a trilogy, it really did not give that much context to this world. And it was my first time reading about the fae, or like fairies, and so I was just so confused the whole time. I was just like, why aren't you giving me a little more world building? It is honestly kind of meh, but it is a little below meh. You know, like it is between nasty and meh. And so yeah, this book just really wasn't it, and so I have to put it in nasty. But I was just like, this is really not that great. Then I read Kingdom of Back by Marie Lu. Honestly, this book was just kind of forgettable, and it felt like it was written for a really younger audience. I wish Marie Lu had stepped up the game a little bit. Yeah, like some of the imagery was very beautiful, but it was just it felt a little short for me. So I have to put it in meh. Like, it was not a book that I really loved, honestly. Then we have The Kiss Quotient by Alan Huang, which was also a cool book with a lot of diversity and autistic rep, but there was just something about it that didn't do it for me. Like, I don't know what it was. I liked Stella's main character, and I like, oh my god, I don't remember our like main love interest name. But I don't know, something about their relationship just didn't really do it for me. I'm kind of torn between cool and meh. It was a little meh for me. I'm gonna piss a lot of people off with this because a lot of people do love this romance, and I get it, but it really didn't work for me, so meh. Then we have The Librarian of Auschwitz by Antonio G. Iturbe. This book suffered a lot from being messy. Like, this was supposed to be half a memoir and half a fiction book, and you can really feel those blurred lines. So this was kind of a meh read, honestly. I'm putting a lot of books in meh. I'm very sad about that. Then we have The Picture of Dorian Gray. This was a reread for me, but it wasn't a reread like in the same year, because all the other rereads on this book are rereads that I read in 2020, but I had read The Picture of Dorian Gray a few years back, and so I'm still counting it. And oh my god, this book is untouchable. It is my favorite classic so far. I haven't read a lot of them, but it's my favorite one so far. It is so fun. It's so dramatic. Oscar Wilde really is that bitch, and it was just so fun. It is an untouchable classic. Next up, we have The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. He's Greek, so I'm really not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. This was a fun thriller, but also the ending really didn't do it for me. I really didn't like the final twist. And so, god, I hate that I'm putting so many books on meh, but I really didn't like this one. Honestly, kind of meh. Then we have The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I really did love this book. It was so fun. And even though it is not a perfect book, I think it is quite untouchable in what it was trying to do. Like, he was really going for a fun, different horror book. And I think that it is quite untouchable in that category. Like, he achieved exactly what he wanted to achieve. And I think that's really admirable. And so, for sure, this book was so much fun. I really loved it, and so it is untouchable in its category for sure. Then we have The Sorrowless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Here I go, pissing a lot of people off again. This book really wasn't it. But honestly, it is not nasty. It is kind of like the Renegades. Like, I could tell that it wasn't for me as soon as I started reading it, and that's honestly okay. I know that a lot of people love Erin Morgenstern writing, and I totally respect that, but it really isn't for me, so I have to put it in meh. It is not nasty because it is not objectively a bad book. It really didn't work for me. It was a 2-star read at best, and so under meh it goes. Then we have The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. I really love this book. A lot of people did. I think most people did. And so I have to put it in so good I could cry. Then we have The Whisper Man by Alex North. Honestly, this thriller was really fun. I also didn't enjoy like the final twists, but I had such low expectations for it because a lot of people hate this book, and I had such little expectations for it that I actually really did enjoy it. I don't know, I'm gonna put it in cool just so I won't put all the thrillers in meh. Then we have The Wicked King, which is the sequel to The Cruel Prince. Honestly, I like this more. This is going on meh still, which is why I put The Cruel Prince in nasty, because I could put both of them in meh, but like that wouldn't be true because I enjoyed The Wicked King a lot more. So I thought that the politics were a lot more fun and the twists were a lot more fun. It wasn't actually enough for me to actually read The Queen of Nothing. I'm still considering reading it just so I can get the trilogy over with. I think I'm gonna put The Wicked King in meh. Like, I feel bad putting The Cruel Prince in nasty because, again, objectively, it's not like a bad book, but should I put just both of them in meh? Okay, I think I'm gonna cave in. I think I'm gonna put both of them in meh. Then we have The Wives by Tarrant Fisher. Oh my god, was this a bad thriller? Like, a hilariously bad thriller. And it has to go in nasty because honestly, it was nasty. Then we have The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins. Honestly, this was a really short, like this is like 16 pages long. And it is said that it is one of the first like horror short stories written by a woman. I'm not sure if that's like completely true. I really don't know. But it was kind of meh. Like, I get that it was good at the time, and I really do appreciate it for what it was. But from what I've heard about, like, the reviews saying that this was, like, really creepy and unsettling to today's standards, I really don't agree with that. I thought it was kind of meh. Then we have The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, which is actually the first one in the Hunger Games trilogy. I have to put it in So Good I Could Cry. Then we have The Savage Song by Victoria Schwab. Listen, I have spoken about Victoria Schwab a lot on my channel, about how I respect her as an author, but apparently her books just are not completely for me. And honestly, I was just really underwhelmed by The Savage Song. The concept was amazing. The characters were so, honestly, I really didn't like Kate. And I don't know, something about it was just kind of meh for me. Honestly, I will put it in meh because it was not that great. And to end this tier ranking video on a sad note, we have Wicked Fox by Kat Cho. I wanted to love this book so bad, but honestly, I didn't. It was confusing. It was kind of cringy, like the dialogue that they have. Like, our main girl and her love interest are just so cringe. And I don't know. It didn't work for me at all, and so it definitely has to go on meh. And yeah, this is my final tier ranking list. And I didn't realize how many like meh books I had read that last year. I still think it was a great reading year. I read a lot of books that I really did enjoy. And hopefully 2021 will be a much better reading year. And I don't know, do you agree with my tier ranking? Which of the books that I mentioned did you read and love? Which books that I mentioned that you read and hated? Let me know any of your opinions down below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more bookish content. And I'll see you in my next video. I hope you have a nice day, and always remember that life is worth reading.